Now let's begin. The gymnasium echoed with the squeak of sneakers and the bouncing of basketballs. Glenn Shaw stood courtside, clipboard in hand, watching his 8th grade team run drills. At 34, he'd built a decent life as a middle school teacher and basketball coach in Millbrook, a town small enough that everyone knew your business, but large enough to disappear in if you wanted to. His phone buzzed in his pocket, but he ignored it. Practice was sacred. 20 minutes later, after he'd sent the kids home with reminders about Friday's game, Glenn checked his messages. One from his wife, Christy Shaw, picking up groceries. Home by 6. Another from his son's school about an upcoming field trip. Nothing unusual. He gathered his equipment and headed to his beat-up Honda Civic, thinking about what to make for dinner. He'd barely pulled into his driveway when his son burst out the front door. Young Shaw was 9 years old, small for his age, with his mother's dark hair and Glenn's gray eyes. But right now, those eyes were red-rimmed and puffy. "Dad," Young ran down the driveway, nearly tripping over his untied shoelaces. Glenn's stomach dropped. He killed the engine and was out of the car in seconds. "What's wrong? Did something happen at Grandma's?" Young had spent the afternoon at Bertha Clifford's house, while Christy worked her shift at the hospital. Young grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the house. "Inside. We have to go inside." The living room was exactly as Glenn had left it that morning. Christy's medical journals stacked on the coffee table, Young's backpack dumped by the stairs, the faint smell of morning coffee still lingering. Young pulled him to the couch, his small hands trembling. "Dad, promise you won't yell." Glenn knelt down, his coach instincts kicking in. "When a kid was this scared, you met them at eye level. You made them feel safe. I promise, buddy." "What happened?" "My friend Kyle's dad is a policeman." Young's voice was barely a whisper. "Kyle Buckley. You know him?" Glenn nodded. He'd taught Kyle's older sister 3 years ago. Officer Buckley was a decent guy, coached Little League, always showed up to school events. Kyle's dad saw Grandma Bertha's name on a file. At the police station, Young fumbled in his pocket and pulled out a piece of paper, folded so many times it was the size of a business card. "He said to give this to you. He said, don't tell Mom." Glenn's hands were steady as he took the paper, but his mind was racing. Why would Bertha Clifford's name be in a police file? Why would Officer Buckley send a note through a 9-year-old? And why the hell shouldn't he tell Christy? He unfolded the paper slowly, aware of Young's eyes watching his every movement. The handwriting was rushed, cramped. "Get out. Tonight. Both of you. File #CC 2019-47. Life insurance fraud ring. 6 victims. Your name listed. No time. Go. Destroy this." Glenn read it twice. 3 times. The words didn't change. Life insurance fraud ring. 6 victims. Your name listed. "Dad." Young's voice cracked. "Are we in trouble?" Glenn looked at his son, really looked at him. Young's Harry Potter t-shirt was on backwards. He had a scrape on his knee from playing at recess. He was supposed to have a spelling test tomorrow. He was 9 years old, and someone had put Glenn's name on a list of victims. Glenn stood up, his mind suddenly, terrifyingly clear. "Go pack a bag. Clothes for 3 days. Your tablet and charger. Your toothbrush. Do it now, and do it quietly." "But Mom." "Young." Glenn's voice was firm, but not harsh. "I need you to trust me right now. Can you do that?" Young nodded, his eyes wide, and ran upstairs. Glenn moved fast. He grabbed the strongbox from his closet, $1,500 in emergency cash, both passports, birth certificates, his grandfather's pocket watch. He stuffed clothes into a duffel bag, not thinking about what matched, just grabbing essentials. His mind was cataloging facts, trying to make sense of the senseless. Life insurance fraud ring. The phrase kept echoing in his head. He'd read about these schemes, people taking out policies on family members, then staging accidents. Drownings. House fires. Carbon monoxide poisoning. All carefully planned to look natural. He thought of his mother-in-law. Bertha Clifford was 72, a retired nurse who'd moved to Millbrook 5 years ago to be closer to Christy and Young. She volunteered at the library, grew prize-winning roses, baked cookies that Young devoured by the dozen. She'd lost her husband, Christy's father, to a heart attack a decade ago. She seemed like everyone's grandmother. But now Glenn was remembering other things. The way Bertha had insisted on taking out a life insurance policy on him last year. "For Young's future," she'd said. "If anything happens to you, Christy will need help." It had seemed thoughtful at the time. Morbid, maybe, but thoughtful. Christy had another policy on him, too. $2 million. We need to be practical, she'd said when she'd brought home the paperwork from the hospital. With your coaching and my nursing, we're comfortable, but if something happened, Glenn had signed without thinking much about it. People did that. It was responsible. Adult. His phone buzzed. Christy, leaving grocery store now. See you soon. He had maybe 10 minutes. Glenn ran to the garage, grabbed 2 camping backpacks he used for his summer wilderness trips with students. He dumped his duffel into one, added bottled water, granola bars, a first aid kit. The other would be for anything else they needed. Young appeared in the kitchen doorway, his Pokemon backpack bulging. I'm ready. Good man. Put that in my car. Front seat. While Young obeyed, Glenn went to Christy's home office. He felt like a criminal going through her desk, but he had to know. Had to be sure. The insurance policies were in the second drawer, in a file labeled Important Documents. Glenn pulled them out. $2 million on him through Christy's work. Another $1 million through Bertha, with Glenn as the insured and Bertha as the beneficiary. That one he'd forgotten about. It had been a birthday gift, she'd said. So Young is taken care of no matter what. $3 million. If he died. His hands were shaking now. He kept digging. Bank statements. Credit card bills. Nothing unusual. Then, at the bottom of the drawer, a burner phone. Cheap, prepaid, the kind you bought at gas stations. Glenn powered it on. There were only a few numbers saved. One labeled MF. One labeled BC. Bertha Clifford. He opened the message thread. All set for Friday. M. Gill confirmed. MF, dated 3 days ago. Good. Shaw won't suspect anything. The carbon monoxide detector is already disabled. BC. What about the kid? At my house that night. He'll be safe. It only affects the master bedroom. Glenn's vision blurred. He gripped the desk to steady himself. Friday. That was tomorrow. They were planning to kill him tomorrow night while Young was at his grandmother's house. While Christy, what? Slept beside him? Or stayed late at the hospital as she sometimes did on Fridays. Was Christy part of this? He heard the garage door opening. Christy was home. Glenn shoved the phone in his pocket, put the files back, and moved to the kitchen. He could see his Honda in the driveway through the window. Young sitting in the passenger seat, watching the house with terrified eyes. Christy came through the door from the garage, arms full of grocery bags, her scrubs still on from her shift. She looked tired, beautiful, normal. Hey babe, can you help me with? She stopped, seeing his face. What's wrong? Glenn had coached basketball for 12 years. He'd learned to read people, to see through bluffs and feints. He looked at his wife, the woman he'd married 10 years ago, who'd held his hand through his father's funeral, who'd stayed up all night with him when Young had pneumonia at age 3, and he saw genuine confusion in her eyes. She didn't know. I have to take Young on a trip, he said quietly. Right now? It's about my mom. His mother, Linda Shaw, lived in Oregon. She'd been sick recently. It was a plausible lie. What? Glenn, you can't just. Is she okay? I don't know yet. I'll call you when I know more. Christy set down the groceries, moving toward him. Let me come with you. I can switch my shifts. No. The word came out harder than he intended. Stay here. I'll handle it. She stopped, hurt flashing across her face. Glenn, what's going on? You're scaring me. He wanted to tell her. Wanted to show her the note, the burner phone. Wanted to ask her how long her mother had been planning to murder him. But if he was wrong, if she was somehow involved, he'd lose the only advantage he had, surprise. I have to go. He kissed her forehead, a brief touch that felt like goodbye. I love you. I'll call soon. Before she could respond, he was out the door, jogging to his car. He heard her calling his name, heard the front door open, but he was already backing out of the driveway. In his rearview mirror, he saw Christy standing on the lawn, still in her scrubs, watching them leave. Dad. Young's voice was small. Is Mom bad too? Glenn's throat was tight. I don't know, buddy. I don't know. They drove through the night, taking back roads, avoiding highways where cameras might track them. Glenn stopped at a gas station in a town called Riverside, 2 hours from Millbrook, and paid cash. He bought a burner phone, a road atlas, and enough snacks to keep Young occupied. While Young used the bathroom, Glenn called the one person he knew he could trust. Shaw residence. The voice was gravelly, older. Uncle Don. Glenn's uncle, Don McGill, was his mother's brother, a retired Marine who lived in the mountains of Colorado. They didn't talk often, But Glenn had spent summers with him as a kid, learning to hunt, to track, to survive in the wilderness. Glenn, that you? It's damn near midnight. I need help. I can't explain everything now, but someone's trying to kill me. I have young. We're running. There was a pause. Then, how far are you from Colorado? 12 hours, maybe less if I push it. Drive straight through. I'll have the cabin ready. And Glenn, ditch your car when you get close. Take a bus the last leg. They'll be looking for your plates. Got it. And son, whatever you're running from, we're going to make sure you can run at it instead. Understand? Glenn felt something unlock in his chest. Yes, sir. Young had fallen asleep by the time they crossed into Kansas, his head pressed against the window, mouth open slightly. Glenn drove with the radio off, his mind working through everything he knew. 6 victims. That's what the note had said. Officer Buckley had seen a file, which meant the police knew. So why hadn't they arrested Bertha? Why send a secret warning instead of making arrests? Because they were building a case. They needed evidence. And maybe they needed the next attempt to happen to catch everyone involved. Glenn was supposed to be victim number 7. He thought about the burner phone in his pocket, the messages between Bertha and someone initialed MF. M. Gill confirmed. Don McGill was his uncle, but there were other McGills in the world. Could be Mario Fisher, one of the names from Young's class directory. Could be anyone. But someone named McGill had confirmed something related to Friday's plan. Glenn's hands tightened on the wheel. Whoever MF was, whatever they'd confirmed, it didn't matter now. He and Young were ghosts. Gone. But Glenn Shaw wasn't going to stay gone forever. He was going to figure out who was behind this, how deep it went, and he was going to make damn sure they paid for it. Not just for him. For the 6 people who'd already died. For Young, who'd lost his innocence at 9 years old. For Christy, if she was truly innocent. The road stretched ahead, empty and dark. In the passenger seat, Young stirred, mumbled something in his sleep. Glenn reached over and rested his hand on his son's shoulder. I got you, buddy, he whispered. I got you. By dawn, they were in Colorado. Don McGill's cabin was exactly as Glenn remembered from his teenage years, a low-slung structure built of logs and stone, nestled in a valley between 2 peaks, accessible only by a private dirt road that wound through pine forest for 3 miles. No neighbors. No cell service. No one could find you here unless you wanted to be found. Don met them on the porch, looking exactly the same despite being in his late 60s. Tall, rangy, with short gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He pulled Glenn into a brief, hard embrace, then knelt down to Young's level. You must be Young. Your dad talked about you a lot when we spoke at Christmas. I'm your great-uncle Don. Young, exhausted and overwhelmed, just nodded. Come on inside. I've got beds made up, food ready. You both look like hell. The cabin's interior was sparse but comfortable. 1 main room with a kitchen, dining area, and living space. 2 bedrooms off to the side. A bathroom that Don had modernized with indoor plumbing in the 90s. The walls were covered with maps, old photographs, and a gun rack holding 3 rifles and a shotgun. Don put Young in the guest room while Glenn stood by the wood stove, warming his hands. When Don returned, he poured 2 mugs of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, gesturing for Glenn to join him. Now, tell me everything. Glenn laid it all out. The note from Officer Buckley. The life insurance policies. The burner phone and its messages. The plan to kill him Friday using carbon monoxide. His decision to run without confronting Christy. Don listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as the story unfolded. 3 million in policies, Don finally said. That's motive enough. But 6 previous victims? This is an amateur hour. Someone's been running this for years. I keep thinking about my mom, Glenn said quietly. Remember when Dad died? 5 years ago. Don's jaw tightened. Heart attack. He was only 59. They said it was a heart attack. But what if? Glenn couldn't finish the sentence. Your father wasn't insured for much. Maybe $50,000 through his work. But he was married to Mom. And Mom was Bertha's best friend before she moved to Millbrook. Don stood abruptly, pacing to the window. You're saying your mother-in-law might have killed your father? I'm saying I don't know what's real anymore. My dad dies suddenly. 5 years later, Bertha moves to our town. A year after that, she's insisting on life insurance for me. And now I find out there are 6 victims, and I'm supposed to be number 7. We need to know who the other victims were, Don said. We need to understand the pattern. Can't go to the police. If Officer Buckley sent a warning instead of making arrests, there's a reason. Either they don't have enough evidence yet, or someone inside is dirty. Or both. Don returned to the table. Here's what we're going to do. You and Young stay here. You're safe. No one knows about this place except family. Meanwhile, I'm going to make some calls. I've got buddies from my service days who owe me favors. People who can dig into things quietly. I can't just hide, Don. Whoever's behind this, they need to pay. They will. But first, we need intelligence. You can't fight an enemy you don't understand. Don leaned forward. I trained Marines for 20 years, Glenn. I know how to plan an operation. You came to me because you trusted me to help. So let me help. Be smart about this. Glenn wanted to argue, but Don was right. He was running on adrenaline and fear, not strategy. Okay, what do I do? Rest. Spend time with your boy. He's been through hell. Meanwhile, I'll start digging. We'll figure out who these people are, what they want, and how to take them down. But we do it carefully, methodically, because if we screw this up, they win. Glenn nodded slowly. Through the bedroom door, he could hear Young's soft snoring. His son had barely spoken during the drive, just stared out the window with two old eyes. Don? Thank you. Don gripped his shoulder. Family takes care of family. That's how it works. Now get some sleep. You look like a walking corpse. Glenn didn't sleep much. He lay in the spare bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Christy. By now, she'd be frantic. She'd have called his mother, maybe even the police. She'd be terrified that something had happened to them. Unless she knew exactly what had happened. Unless she was in on it. The thought made him physically ill. But he couldn't risk calling her. Not yet. Not until he knew for sure. Around noon, he emerged to find Don at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers and a laptop, surprising in a place with no internet. Satellite connection, Don explained. Slow as hell, but it works. I've been making calls. Got some interesting information. Young was still asleep. Glenn poured coffee and sat down. Tell me. File hashtag CC 2019-47. That's the one Officer Buckley mentioned. CC stands for Clifford Conspiracy. That's the internal name the police gave the case. Started 3 years ago when a detective named Melissa Slaughter noticed a pattern. 5 deaths in different states over 6 years, all listed as accidents or natural causes, all with life insurance payouts, all connected to the same person. Bertha, Glenn said. Bertha Clifford. But she's not working alone. The victims were all men, all between 30 and 60, all married or about to be married to women who had some connection to Bertha. Former coworkers from her nursing days. Friends from church. Women she'd met through various social groups. Glenn felt his stomach turn. She was recruiting them. Looks like it. The pattern is consistent. Bertha befriends a woman who's in a relationship with a man who has money or could be insured for significant amounts. They take out policies. Wait a year or two so it doesn't look suspicious. Then the man dies. House fire, drowning, carbon monoxide poisoning. One guy supposedly fell off a ladder while cleaning gutters. The insurance pays out. The woman and Bertha split the money. You said 5 victims. The note said 6. The 6th was 3 months ago. A guy named Andrew Baird in Montana. Carbon monoxide in his sleep. His wife, Gladys Goodwin, had been friends with Bertha from an online support group for widows. Glenn processed this. So Bertha targets vulnerable women, widows, single mothers, people who need money. She cultivates these friendships, introduces the idea of insurance fraud, helps plan the murders, and takes her cut. We're talking millions of dollars over the years. The detective, Slaughter, figured it out, but getting evidence is hard. The deaths are in different jurisdictions. The insurance policies are legit. Everything looks coincidental until you see the pattern. So why am I still alive? Why didn't they arrest her? Don's face was grim. Because they needed to catch her in the act. They've been watching her, waiting for the next attempt. They have surveillance, phone taps, the works. And you were supposed to be that next attempt, the one that would give them everything they needed for an airtight case. So I was bait. You were. But Officer Buckley broke protocol. He saw your name on the victim list, knew your son from school, couldn't stomach letting it happen even for the case. So he warned you. Glenn stood, rage building in his chest. They were going to let me die? The police knew and they were going to let it happen. Not quite. They were planning a raid for Thursday night, one day before the attempt. They were going to arrest Bertha and whoever else was involved. But Buckley jumped the gun and warned you. Now you've disappeared. and the whole case might fall apart. Good. Fuck the case. I'm alive. Young's alive. That's what matters. Don nodded. Agreed. But here's the problem. Bertha and her accomplices now know something's wrong. You ran. They'll realize the plan is blown. They'll scatter, destroy evidence, disappear. Which means they might never face justice. Glenn sat back down, his mind racing. Unless we force their hand. What are you thinking? Bertha doesn't know where I am. Christy doesn't know where I am. The police don't know where I am. As far as anyone knows, I'm gone. But what if I reach out? What if I contact Bertha directly, tell her I know everything, and force her to react? That's dangerous. She's a killer, Glenn. She's orchestrated 6 murders. 7, if you count my father. Don paused. You really think she killed your dad? Glenn pulled out the burner phone he'd taken from Christie's office. I think we need to find out who MF is. Whoever they are, they're directly involved in this. And I'm betting we can trace them back to what happened to Dad. Don studied the phone. I can have my tech guy pull data from this. Messages, call logs, everything. It'll take a couple days. Do it. Meanwhile, I need to think. I need a plan. Glenn. Don's voice was serious. Revenge is one thing. Survival is another. Right now, you and Young are safe. Don't throw that away for payback. Glenn looked at his uncle. This man who'd served his country, who'd trained soldiers, who'd survived combat. You told me on the phone we'd make sure I could run at this problem instead of away from it. Were you lying? No. But running at it doesn't mean being stupid about it. I'm not going to be stupid. I'm going to be smart. Methodical. Just like you taught me. Glenn felt something crystallize in his mind. Bertha Clifford has been killing people for years. She was going to kill me and leave my son without a father. She might have already killed my father. And if I do nothing, if I just hide here and hope the police handle it, there's no guarantee she'll pay for what she's done. No guarantee the other women involved will be caught. No guarantee this doesn't happen to someone else. Don was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right, let's plan this right. But we do it my way, carefully, with contingencies, and with an exit strategy. Agreed. Agreed. Young appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. Dad? What's happening? Glenn went to his son, knelt down. We're figuring out how to keep you safe, buddy, and how to make sure the bad people can't hurt anyone else. Young's face was solemn. Is Grandma Bertha a bad person? Glenn's chest ached. How do you tell a 9-year-old that his grandmother is a monster? I think Grandma Bertha has done some very bad things, and we need to stop her. What about Mom? That was the question that kept Glenn up at night. I don't know yet. I hope Mom didn't know about any of this. Young nodded slowly, processing. Then, in a voice that was far too mature for his age, I want to help. You are helping. By being brave. By trusting me. But I want to really help. Grandma Bertha tried to hurt you. That means she tried to hurt me too, by taking you away. I want her to pay for that. Glenn looked at his son and saw something he recognized. Determination. The same determination that had driven Glenn to flee in the middle of the night, that was driving him now to plan revenge instead of hiding. Okay, Glenn said. Let's figure this out together. Don McGill watched them, his expression unreadable. Then he pulled out a notebook and a pen. First rule of any operation, know your enemy. Let's start listing everything we know about Bertha Clifford and everyone she's working with. Glenn pulled up a chair. Young sat on his lap. And together, they began planning. Over the next 3 days, the cabin became a war room. Don's contacts came through with information that painted a disturbing picture. The 5 original victims were: Christopher Head, 42, died in a house fire in Minnesota 7 years ago. His girlfriend at the time, Rhonda Simon, had been friends with Bertha from a nursing conference. Rhonda collected $800,000. Vince Hampton, 38, drowned during a fishing trip in Wisconsin 6 years ago. His wife, Leah O'Connor, had met Bertha through an online book club. Leah collected $1.2 million. Brad McCarthy, 51, died from carbon monoxide poisoning in Michigan 5 years ago. His wife, Desiree Brandt, had worked with Bertha at a hospital in the 90s. Desiree collected $1.5 million. Daryl Bender, 45, fell from a ladder in Ohio 4 years ago, breaking his neck. His wife, Margie Russell, had been Bertha's roommate in nursing school. Margie collected $900,000. Andrew Baird, 36, died from carbon monoxide in Montana 3 months ago. His wife, Gladys Goodwin, had met Bertha in a widow's support group online. Gladys collected $2.1 million. $6.5 million total. Split between Bertha and 5 women over 7 years. And Glenn would have been number 6, another $3 million to add to the total. These women aren't just friends, Glenn said, studying the chart they'd created on Don's wall. They're co-conspirators. Each one actively participated in killing their partner. And got away with it, Don added. Because the deaths were spread out geographically and temporally. No pattern until Detective Slaughter started looking. What about MF? Young asked. He'd become part of the team, helping organize documents, asking questions that sometimes got to the heart of things faster than the adults. Don's tech contact had pulled data from the burner phone. MF's full name was Mario Fisher. He was a 58-year-old from Oregon, the same state where Glenn's parents had lived. More digging revealed that Mario Fisher had been a hospital administrator at the facility where Bertha worked before she retired. He'd taken early retirement 7 years ago, right around the time Christopher Head died. He's the inside man, Glenn realized. He helps set up the insurance policies, maybe falsifies medical records to make the deaths look natural. And McGill confirmed in the messages, Don said slowly. Might not mean me at all. Could be someone using McGill as a code word. Or it refers to my mother, Glenn said quietly. Linda McGill Shaw. Her maiden name is McGill. The room went silent. Your mother is in Oregon, Don said carefully. Where Mario Fisher lived. Where your father died 5 years ago. Glenn felt like he was falling. You think Mom's involved? I think we need to find out. Don picked up his phone. I'm calling Linda. Right now. He dialed. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Don tried again. Same result. Glenn's hands were shaking. Try the landline. Don did. No answer. When's the last time you talked to your mom? Don asked. Last week. She said she was feeling better. She'd been sick with something respiratory. I told her I'd visit soon. Glenn stopped. Oh my God. I told Christy I was taking Young to visit my mom. If Christy is in on this, if she told Bertha, they might go after your mother to smoke you out. Don was already moving, grabbing a jacket, keys. We need to get to Oregon. Now. That's a 12-hour drive. Then we leave now and drive through the night. Again. Don looked at Young. You up for another road trip, kid? Young nodded, his face pale but determined. They packed quickly, loading Don's Jeep with supplies. Glenn took one of the rifles from the rack, an old Winchester that he remembered Don teaching him to shoot when he was 16. If we're right, Glenn said as they loaded the car, if my mother is involved in this, I don't know what I'll do. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Right now we move. Fast. The Jeep roared to life, and they were gone, racing toward Oregon and answers Glenn wasn't sure he wanted to find. They arrived at Linda Shaw's house in Portland at 3 in the morning. The small ranch-style home was dark, no cars in the driveway. Glenn's stomach was in knots as they approached the front door. Let me go first, Don said, the rifle held low but ready. The front door was unlocked. That was the first bad sign. Linda was meticulous about locks. Inside, the house was neat, undisturbed. No signs of a struggle, but also no signs of life. Mom, Glenn called out, moving through the living room. Linda. Don checked the bedrooms. Empty. The kitchen showed a coffee mug in the sink, a newspaper from 2 days ago on the table. Glenn. Young was in the hallway, pointing at something on the floor. A cell phone. Cracked screen. Battery dead. Glenn picked it up, his hands shaking. It was his mother's phone. He recognized the case with pressed flowers that she'd made herself. She wouldn't leave without her phone, Glenn said. She wouldn't leave her door unlocked. Don was examining the living room more carefully now. He knelt by the couch, running his hand along the carpet. When he stood, his fingers had a faint red residue. Blood. Not much, but it's here. Glenn felt rage and fear warring in his chest. They took her. Or she's part of this and staged it to look like she was taken, Don said quietly. You don't believe that. I don't know what to believe. But we need to think clearly. Your mother's maiden name is McGill. McGill confirmed, was in those messages. Either she's a victim or she's been working with Bertha all along. Glenn couldn't believe he was saying it. My dad dies, Mom's friend Bertha shows up, suddenly I'm on the victim list. Maybe it was always the plan. Mom and Bertha kill Dad, collect his insurance, then move on to bigger targets. Young tugged on Glenn's shirt. Dad, look. He was holding a photo frame from the mantel. The picture showed Linda and Bertha together, smiling at some event. But Young had turned it over. On the back, in faded pen, were names and numbers. CH, 800 kVH, 1.2 mbm, 1.5 mdb, 900 kub, 2.1 m. The initials matched the victims. The numbers matched the insurance payouts. She kept a record, Dawn said. Why would she keep a record? Insurance, Glenn said bitterly. Not the life insurance kind. The blackmail kind. If Bertha ever tried to cut her out or turn on her, Mom had proof. Young's voice was small. So Grandma Linda is bad too? Glenn knelt down, putting his hands on his son's shoulders. I don't know, buddy. Maybe she was forced into it. Maybe she's in trouble now. We need to find her. Or maybe, a voice said from behind them, you should have stayed gone. They spun around. Standing in the hallway was a man Glenn didn't recognize, late 50s, gray hair, wearing a windbreaker. He had a gun pointed directly at Glenn's chest. Mario Fisher, Dawn said, his own rifle coming up. Don't. Mario's gun didn't waver. I'm a good shot, and I don't want to hurt the kid. Everyone just stay calm. Glenn's mind was racing. This was the MF from the messages. The inside man. Where's my mother? Safe. For now. Bertha has her. Insurance, like you said. To make sure you come back. I'm right here. Not to Portland. To Millbrook. Bertha wants this handled personally. She's very unhappy that you ruined her plan. Good. Tell her to shove her unhappiness. Mario fired. The bullet hit the wall 6 inches from Glenn's head. Young screamed. The next one goes in your leg, Mario said calmly. I don't need you walking to collect the insurance. Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to drive back to Millbrook. You're going to meet Bertha at your house tomorrow night at 10 p.m. You come alone. Your uncle and your boy stay here with me. If you don't show, or if you bring the police, your mother dies, and then I kill these two. Understand? Dawn's rifle was still raised. I can drop you before you pull that trigger again. Maybe. But can you guarantee Glenn doesn't take a bullet in the process? Can you guarantee the boy stays safe? Mario smiled. I didn't think so. Now put the rifle down. Dawn lowered it slowly. Mario gestured with his gun. Move. All of you. Basement. Now. They had no choice. Mario herded them to the basement stairs, keeping his distance. The basement was unfinished, concrete floor and walls, small windows near the ceiling. Inside. Once they were down the stairs, Mario slammed the door. They heard a lock click, then something heavy being dragged across the door, probably furniture. Glenn immediately went to the windows. Too small to climb through, and they were at ground level, which meant the house was built into a slope. From here, they were fully underground. Well, Dawn said, sitting on the stairs, this is not ideal. Young was crying quietly. Glenn pulled him close. It's okay, buddy. We'll figure this out. How? Young's voice was muffled against Glenn's chest. He has a gun. We're locked in. Dawn stood, examining the door at the top of the stairs. Solid core, reinforced. I could probably kick it down given time, but he'd hear us and... He didn't finish the sentence, but they all knew, and Mario would shoot them. Glenn was thinking furiously. They'd been outmaneuvered. Mario had been waiting for them, which meant Bertha had anticipated Glenn would go to his mother's house. She'd planned for this. But had she planned for everything? Dawn, Glenn said slowly, your Jeep. It has that emergency beacon, right? The one you showed me that connects to satellite. Yeah, for backcountry emergencies. But it's in the Jeep, which is outside, which doesn't help us. Did you activate it before we went inside? Dawn's eyes widened. No, but I have the backup transmitter in my jacket. Always keep it on me. Force of habit. He pulled out a device the size of a deck of cards. This sends an SOS to local emergency services with GPS coordinates. Do it. Glenn, if we bring the police here, Mario will kill us before they can breach the house. Maybe. Or maybe we give them a reason to come in fast. Glenn looked at the basement around them. Old house. Probably has the electrical panel down here. Young, help me look for the breaker box. They found it on the far wall, an old gray panel with circuit breakers. Glenn opened it, studying the layout. What are you thinking? Dawn asked. We cut the power. House goes dark. Mario either has to come investigate or stay put in the dark. Either way, it creates chaos. When the police respond to the beacon, they see a situation in progress. Power's out, people trapped in basement, armed man upstairs. They come in hot. And if Mario just shoots through the door the second the lights go out, then we're on the opposite side of the basement when he does. But I don't think he will. He needs me alive to go back to Millbrook. He needs Young as leverage. He's not going to risk killing us unless he has to. Don considered this. It's risky. Everything's risky at this point. But doing nothing guarantees Bertha wins. Young pulled on Glenn's sleeve. Dad, I have an idea. What is it, buddy? When the lights go out, we make a lot of noise. Like we're trying to break down the door. But we're actually hiding. When Mario comes to check, Uncle Don can grab him. It was simple. Maybe too simple. But sometimes the simple plans were the ones that worked. Smart kid, Don said, a smile tugging at his mouth. You've got your dad's brains. Glenn felt a surge of pride mixed with terror. His 9-year-old son was planning an ambush on an armed murderer. Okay, Glenn said. Don activates the beacon. I cut the main breaker. We make noise like we're trying to escape, but we hide. When Mario opens that door, Don takes him down. We get the gun, we secure Mario, and we wait for the police. And if it doesn't work, then we improvise. Don activated the emergency beacon. The small device blinked red, confirming transmission. Signal sent. Police response time in this area is usually 10 to 15 minutes. Then let's make those minutes count. Glenn reached for the main breaker. Everyone ready? Young nodded, his jaw set. Don positioned himself at the base of the stairs, behind where the door would open. Glenn threw the breaker. The house plunged into darkness. Immediately, they started making noise. Glenn grabbed a metal shelf and shook it, creating a loud rattling. Young banged on the door, yelling. Don shouted, "The lock's loose. Push harder." They kept it up for 30 seconds, then stopped abruptly and moved to their hiding spots. Glenn and Young behind an old water heater, Don pressed against the wall at the base of the stairs. Silence. Then, from above, "What the hell did you do?" Glenn didn't answer. Footsteps. A flashlight beam appeared under the door. "I swear to God, if you've broken something." The door unlocked. The heavy object scraped away. The door opened. Mario stood at the top of the stairs, flashlight in one hand, gun in the other. "Get back down there before I..." Don moved. He grabbed Mario's ankle and yanked, hard. Mario's feet went out from under him and he tumbled down the stairs, the gun flying from his hand. He hit the concrete floor with a sickening thud and didn't move. Don immediately went for the gun, securing it. Glenn came out from hiding, turning on his phone's flashlight. Mario was unconscious, a nasty gash on his head bleeding freely. "He's alive," Don said, checking for a pulse. "But he'll be out for a while." Sirens wailed in the distance. The police were coming. Glenn sagged against the wall, adrenaline leaving him shaky. Young ran to him, and Glenn held his son tight. "We did it," Young whispered. "Dad, we did it." "Yeah, buddy, we did." The police arrived 7 minutes after the beacon activated. By then, Glenn had used zip ties from his mother's garage to secure Mario Fisher, and they'd brought him upstairs to the living room. Don had turned the breaker back on. Detective Melissa Slaughter was the first through the door, gun drawn, 3 uniformed officers behind her. She took in the scene, Glenn and Don standing calmly, Young sitting on the couch, Mario zip-tied and groggy on the floor, and her expression shifted from alarm to confusion to recognition. "Glenn Shaw," she said, lowering her weapon. "We've been looking for you." "I know. I ran. Officer Buckley told us he warned you. Broke protocol, compromised our entire investigation." She didn't sound happy about it. "He saved my life. Maybe. Or maybe you just delayed the inevitable." She gestured to her officers. "Secure the suspect. Get medics for his head wound." As they hauled Mario to his feet, Slaughter turned back to Glenn. "We had a plan, Mr. Shaw. You were going to be safe. We were going to make arrests. But you panicked and ran, and now the whole case might be compromised. With respect, Detective, your plan involved using me as bait without my knowledge or consent. So forgive me if I don't feel bad about messing it up." Slaughter's jaw tightened. "Where's your wife?" "Millbrook, I assume." "Where's my mother?" "We don't know. Linda Shaw has been missing for 2 days. We thought you might have her. Bertha Clifford has her, using her as leverage to force me back to Millbrook. And you know this how?" Glenn gestured to Mario. "He told us, right before we took his gun away and knocked him unconscious." Slaughter looked at Don. "Who are you?" "Don McGill, retired Marine. Glenn's uncle. Also the guy who just helped capture your suspect, which I'm thinking earns us some cooperation rather than an interrogation." Slaughter studied them for a long moment. Then she holstered her weapon and pulled out a chair. Sit. All of you. Let's talk. They talked for 2 hours. Glenn told Slaughter everything. The burner phone, the messages, the victim list, the evidence on the back of the photo frame. Slaughter confirmed what they'd already learned from Dawn's contacts. The investigation into Bertha Clifford and her network had been ongoing for 3 years, but building a prosecutable case had been nearly impossible. The deaths were clean, Slaughter explained. Ruled accidents or natural causes by local authorities. Different states, different jurisdictions, no obvious connections. We only caught it because I have a background in insurance fraud and I noticed the pattern while working a different case. So what now? Glenn asked. You have Mario Fisher. That's something. It's a start. But Fisher is a mid-level player. We need Bertha. We need the women who killed their partners. We need the whole network. Then let's give it to you, Glenn said. Bertha wants me in Millbrook tomorrow night. I'll go. Absolutely not. That's exactly the kind of cowboy thinking that. She has my mother. She's planning to kill me to silence me and salvage what she can of the scheme. If I don't show, she disappears and you never find her. Slaughter shook her head. We'll find her. We have resources. Detective. Dawn's voice was quiet but firm. Glenn's right. Bertha's spooked now. She knows the plan is blown. She'll cut her losses, eliminate Linda Shaw as a witness, and vanish. You'll spend years trying to find her while she sets up somewhere else under a new name. But if Glenn walks into that house tomorrow night, she's there. You can surround the place, record everything, and make your arrests. We're not using a civilian as bait. I'm volunteering, Glenn said. This isn't your choice. It's mine. Young tugged on Glenn's sleeve. Dad, no. It's too dangerous. Glenn knelt down. I have to, buddy. To save Grandma Linda. And to make sure Bertha can't hurt anyone else. Then I'm coming too. Absolutely not. She'll expect me, Young said, his voice steady. If you show up without me, she'll know something's wrong. But if we're both there, she'll think you gave in. She'll think she won. Slaughter was shaking her head, but Glenn could see she was considering it. Young was right. Bertha would be suspicious if Glenn came alone. But a father bringing his son, both of them looking scared and defeated, that would sell the story. I don't like this, Slaughter said. At all. But, she sighed. If we do this, we do it my way. Wired. Surveillance team in place. Sniper coverage. The second things go wrong, we breach. Agreed, Glenn said. But I want my mother out first. However we do this, Linda gets to safety before you make arrests. That I can work with. Slaughter stood. You're staying in protective custody until tomorrow night. We'll prep you, get you wired, and go over the plan 100 times. Mario Fisher will be interrogated. With any luck, he'll give us what we need to know about the setup. As Slaughter's team loaded Mario Fisher into a police cruiser, Glenn watched from the porch. Dawn came to stand beside him. You sure about this? Dawn asked. No, but it's the only way to end it. You've changed, Glenn. 5 days ago, you were a teacher and a coach. Now you're planning a tactical operation against a murder conspiracy. 5 days ago, I thought my biggest problem was getting my team to run decent plays. Now I know my mother-in-law tried to kill me, and my mother might be an accomplice. Glenn turned to his uncle. I don't want to be this person, but I have to be. For Young. For the people Bertha killed. For Dad. Dawn gripped his shoulder. Your father would be proud of you. Whatever Linda's involvement, whatever happens next, you're doing the right thing. Glenn hoped that was true. The next day crawled by. They stayed at a safe house in Portland under police protection. Detective Slaughter's team prepped Glenn on what to expect, how to wear a wire, how to keep Bertha talking long enough to get a confession. Mario Fisher, facing multiple charges, had cut a deal. He told them everything. The insurance scheme, the recruitment process, the way Bertha had built her network over decades. He also confirmed Linda Shaw's involvement. She'd been part of it from the beginning, helping to identify targets and facilitate the murders of her husband and the others. Glenn took the news like a punch to the gut. His mother, the woman who'd raised him, who'd taught him right from wrong, was a serial accomplice to murder. Young cried when he heard. Glenn held him, unable to offer comfort because he was devastated himself. But Fisher also gave them something useful. Linda was being held at Glenn's house in Millbrook. Bertha was planning to stage a murder-suicide. Glenn kills his mother in a rage after discovering her involvement, then kills himself out of guilt. The perfect way to tie up loose ends. She won't have time to set that up if we move tonight, Slaughter said. We go in fast, we get Linda out, and we arrest everyone present. No, Glenn said. We stick to the plan. I need to face Bertha. I need her to confess to everything on tape. Otherwise, good lawyers and jurisdictional issues might let her walk. Glenn, I'm doing this, detective. With or without your help. Slaughter swore under her breath. Fine, but we're doing it smart. You wear 2 wires in case one fails. You keep Bertha talking. We move in at my signal, not a second before or after. Clear. Crystal. That night, Glenn and Young drove back to Millbrook in an unmarked police car, Detective Slaughter at the wheel. Don followed in another vehicle with the tactical team. They arrived at 9 p.m., an hour before the scheduled meeting. Slaughter's team set up in neighboring houses, in unmarked vans down the street, on rooftops with sniper coverage. They had every angle covered. Glenn was wired with 2 recording devices, one in his collar, another in his watch. At 9:55 p.m., Glenn and Young walked up to their own front door. It felt surreal. 5 days ago, he'd run from this house in fear. Now he was walking back in, ready to face the woman who'd tried to kill him. The door was unlocked. Glenn pushed it open. Inside, the house was dark except for a single lamp in the living room. Bertha Clifford sat in Glenn's favorite chair, looking elderly and frail in a cardigan and slippers. Next to her, bound to a dining room chair with duct tape, was Linda Shaw. She looked haggard, bruised, terrified. Mom, Glenn said. Glenn, I'm sorry, Linda sobbed. I'm so sorry. I never wanted. Quiet, Bertha said pleasantly. She had a gun in her lap. A revolver, old but well-maintained. Hello, Glenn. Young, I'm glad you could make it. Young pressed against Glenn's side. Glenn put a protective arm around him. Let my mother go, Glenn said. In time. First, we need to talk. Bertha gestured to the couch. Sit. They sat. Glenn could feel the wire in his collar, the one in his watch. He needed to keep Bertha talking. Needed her confession. Why, he asked. Why kill all those people? Why try to kill me? Bertha smiled. Money, of course. I'm sure you figured that out by now. Your mother and I have been working together for a long time. We're good at what we do. You kill people for insurance money. We solve problems. Women married to men who don't appreciate them. Men who are worth more dead than alive. We facilitate transitions. You're a murderer. I'm a practical woman. Bertha's tone was conversational, almost cheerful. I spent 40 years as a nurse, wiping bedpans and taking orders from doctors who made 10 times my salary. I was tired of being poor. Tired of struggling. Linda felt the same way. So we helped each other. Glenn glanced at his mother. Linda was crying, shaking her head, but she didn't deny it. My father, Glenn said. You killed him. That was unfortunate, but necessary. He was going to discover what Linda and I were doing. We couldn't risk it. So you killed him and made it look like a heart attack. Digitalis overdose, Bertha said proudly. Mimics a cardiac event perfectly. Linda administered it herself. She was quite brave. Linda let out a wail. He was going to turn us in. We had no choice. Glenn felt sick. His father had died discovering that his wife was a killer. He died trying to do the right thing. And what about me? Glenn asked, forcing his voice steady. Why kill me? I never suspected anything. I was no threat. You were worth $3 million. And Christy needed money for her mother's cancer treatments. She doesn't know that yet. I haven't told her about the diagnosis. But I will, right after you're gone. She'll need that insurance money. She'll thank me eventually. So Christy was innocent. That was something. How many people have you killed, Bertha? Me personally? Just your father and one other, a man named Christopher Head, 7 years ago. The rest were handled by the women I recruited. I merely facilitated, provided expertise, took my percentage. Facilitated murder. You mean you trained them to kill? I taught them to survive in a world that undervalues women. I gave them options their husbands never gave them. Bertha's eyes were cold now. Don't you dare judge me, Glenn. You have no idea what it's like to be powerless, to watch men take everything while you get nothing. So you decided to take their lives instead. Yes, and I'd do it again. Bertha raised the gun. Starting with you. No. Young lunged forward, putting himself between Glenn and Bertha. Young, get back. Glenn grabbed his son, pulling him behind the couch. Bertha stood, the gun trained on them. This is disappointing. I really hoped we could do this cleanly. But I suppose I can work with the struggle. Murder-suicide still plays if there's evidence of a fight. Police are outside, Glenn said. You're not getting away with this. Nice try, but I've been watching the street. No police. No one. You came alone, just like I. The front door exploded inward. Police. Drop the weapon. Bertha spun, firing. The shot went wide. Officers swarmed in, shouting commands. Bertha tried to aim at Glenn, tried to finish it, but a sniper's bullet took her in the shoulder and she went down, the gun clattering away. It was over in seconds. Bertha was on the floor, screaming in pain and rage. Linda was freed from her restraints by an officer. Young was crying, and Glenn held him, shaking with adrenaline and relief. Detective Slaughter entered, surveying the scene. Everyone secure? Is anyone hurt? We're okay, Glenn said. We're okay. Slaughter knelt beside Bertha, reading her rights as medics arrived to treat her gunshot wound. Then she looked at Glenn. Got every word. The whole confession. She's done. Glenn nodded, unable to speak. It was really over. The aftermath took weeks to untangle. Bertha Clifford was charged with 6 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, 2 counts of first-degree murder, Glenn's father and Christopher Head, and multiple counts of insurance fraud. Mario Fisher turned state's evidence and received a reduced sentence. Linda Shaw was charged as an accomplice and sentenced to 20 years. The 5 women Bertha had recruited, Rhonda Simon, Leah O'Connor, Desiree Brandt, Margie Russell, and Gladys Goodwin, were all arrested and tried separately. Most took plea deals. Rhonda Simon, the first victim's girlfriend, fought the charges and was convicted, receiving life without parole. Christy Shaw was devastated by the revelations. She'd had no idea what her mother was planning, hadn't known about the cancer that Bertha claimed to justify the scheme. She and Glenn went through counseling, trying to rebuild trust. It was hard. Some days, Glenn wondered if they'd make it. But Christy had been innocent, and they had Young to think about. Officer Buckley was reprimanded for breaking protocol, but ultimately kept his job. Glenn thanked him personally, bringing Young along so Buckley could see the boy he'd saved. Don McGill returned to Colorado, but he called every week to check on Glenn and Young. You did good, he told Glenn during one call. You protected your boy. You got justice. Your father would be proud. Glenn returned to teaching and coaching, trying to find normalcy in the routine. But he was different now. Harder. More alert. He saw threats where he hadn't before, questioned motives, trusted less easily. Young struggled too. He had nightmares about Bertha, about being locked in basements, about losing his father. Glenn got him into therapy, where a patient counselor named Jacqueline Herring helped Young process the trauma. 6 months after Bertha's arrest, Glenn took Young on a camping trip to Don's cabin in Colorado. They hiked, fished, talked about things. Slowly, Young started to seem like himself again. The bright, curious kid he'd been before learning that his grandmother was a monster. On their last night at the cabin, they sat by a campfire under a sky full of stars. Dad, Young poked at the fire with a stick. Can I ask you something? Anything, buddy. Do you think Grandma Linda loved us? Even a little? Glenn considered the question. His mother was in prison. She'd be there for the rest of her life, probably. She'd written him letters, begging forgiveness, explaining how Bertha had manipulated her, how it had started small and spiraled out of control. Glenn hadn't responded. I think she loved us in her own way, Glenn said finally. But love isn't enough when you're doing evil things. Love doesn't excuse murder. She made her choices, and now she's paying for them. Young nodded slowly. I don't want to see her. You don't have to. But I do want to see Mom. And I want us to be okay again. Me too, Glenn said. We will be. It'll take time, but we'll get there. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire. Glenn thought about everything that had happened, the terror of running, the revelation of betrayal, the violence of confrontation. He thought about the 6 people who'd died before he'd been warned, the families destroyed by Bertha's greed. He thought about justice and whether they'd really achieved it. Bertha would die in prison. The women she'd recruited would pay for their crimes. But the victims were still dead. The families still broken. Still, Glenn had done what he could. He'd protected his son. He'd stopped Bertha from claiming his 7th victim. He'd survived. Sometimes, survival was victory enough. Dad, Young leaned against him. I'm glad we're okay. Glenn put his arm around his son. Me too, buddy. Me too. The fire crackled. The stars wheeled overhead. And for the first time in months, Glenn Shaw felt something like peace. 2 years later, Glenn stood in the parking lot of Millbrook Middle School, watching his team load the bus for their first away game of the season. Young was 11 now, tall enough to almost reach Glenn's shoulder, playing point guard just like his dad had hoped. Life had returned to something resembling normal. Glenn and Christy had stayed together, though their relationship had changed. There was less casual trust now, more deliberate communication. They'd had to rebuild from scratch, and the foundation was stronger for it. Bertha Clifford had died in prison 6 months ago. Heart attack, the report said. Glenn felt nothing when he heard. No relief, no satisfaction, just nothing. Linda Shaw was still alive, still writing letters that Glenn sometimes read but never answered. Young had met with her once, in prison, supervised. It hadn't gone well. He'd come out crying, saying he didn't want to go back. Glenn hadn't made him. Detective Melissa Slaughter had been promoted to lieutenant. She called Glenn sometimes, updating him on cases that stemmed from Bertha's network. There were still trials happening, still revelations coming to light. The scope of Bertha's operation had been even larger than they'd initially thought. But standing here, watching his son laugh with his teammates, Glenn felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Genuine happiness. Not the absence of pain, but actual, positive joy. Young saw him watching and waved. Glenn waved back. They'd survived. They'd won. The bad guys were in prison or dead. The innocent were safe. Sometimes, that's all you could ask for. Glenn climbed on the bus, ready to coach his team, ready to live his life. The shadows of the past would always be there. He understood that now. But they didn't control him. He controlled them. And that made all the difference. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.